Okay, class, next we're going to shift gears. The official state religions of Rome were not satisfying to the average person on the street, so this gave rise to popular religions and religious expressions. This is what we'll look at next. It's kind of a search for a bridge to divine transcendence. That idea is now expressed popularly in other kinds of religious expressions. Greco-Roman popular religions. These non-state expressions became very popular. The common people on the street, all throughout the empire. Why? Because they were more personal. They offered answers to those gaps in the official state religion. And they were open to the masses. It was not just the elite upper class. What did the common people believe about religion, and how did they worship the gods of their world? Embedded in their beliefs and practice were a search for answers, perennial questions of life, the big three: the question of origin, where did I come from? The question of meaning, why am I here? And the question of destiny, where am I going? So there's psychological, social, spiritual needs of humanity that the Greco-Roman popular religions tried to meet. So what were some of these popular religions? Well, the first that we'll look at is oracles. Oracle sites were usually connected with a civil cult. Cult sites formed around a myth concerning a god who manifested himself to a certain people and place. For example, Corinth had a Delphi site. That is, there they had flamen, that is, priests, and priestess called Apathia, who claimed to have revelations from the gods, and they would respond to questions of the people. And so people would come to Delphi, ask a question. The Pathia would go into a trance, and she would say something in some kind of poetic prose, some kind of poetry that could be interpreted a lot of different ways. And the priest would try to give an interpretation to it. Now, the visitor usually went away with an answer that could be right no matter how things turned out. So, for example, King Xerxes came to Delphi in 480 BC, and with the help of an oracle from Delphi, the oracle said Zeus would be given a wooden wall. Zeus will give Athens a wooden wall. So how was that interpreted? Well, the Mescalese interpreted that to mean that wooden wall meant to build a navy ship out of wood. And so it was the navy that they invested all their funds in for that war. Oracles did become subject to the dishonesty of men, of course. Prophecy for pay, nothing new here. But as far as they were concerned, that's why you would bring your offering and sacrifice to procure a message from the gods for direction in your life. And procedures to the oracle sites were not uniform. They varied widely, but they all expressed this need for revelation and guidance. That's going to be very clear to us as we see it expressed, for example, in Romans chapter 10, where Paul says, he's quoting Deuteronomy 30 here, the word is near you. Not the Old Testament now, but it's the gospel about Jesus Christ. God answered man's thirst for transcendent truth and knowledge of divine will in the preaching of the gospel. What must I do to be saved? And the answer is believe on the Lord Jesus and you will be saved. Next was divination. Another popular expression was dreams and divination. You can read about this in Ferguson's book on page 220 following. Dreams were seen as a means of knowing the future or knowing something that was in the will of God. The idea was that during sleep, the soul can leave the body and traverse the spiritual world, make contact with the gods, and the gods could communicate their will with the mortal in terms of a dream. And Plutarch said, quote, it is our most ancient and respected form of divination, that is, of knowing the future. Of course, the problem is dreams need to be interpreted. So for example, Joseph goes down to Egypt. The Pharaoh has a dream. Another priest could divine his meaning. Joseph is used to interpret the dream. Later, during the exile, we find King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. He forgets his dream. He requires his soothsayers to tell him the dream, give an interpretation. They said, what are you asking? That belongs to the gods. They were cast out. But Daniel was able to tell him his dream and also act as the mantis, that is the prophet diviner, who could interpret the dream. Now, it shows the quest of man to know his destiny, a quest to know the future, his fate, so as to control it, the outcome of one's future. There's the TV show, The Early Edition. I don't know if you remember this or not. A person hears a cat at the door, opens the door, down at his feet is a newspaper. But the newspaper is for tomorrow. It's tomorrow's news. And the main protagonist of the movie goes about trying to prevent the bad things that are about to happen so that they don't happen. Well, what's going on? He's trying to change destiny, to control the future. It's a theme throughout the ages because of the need of humans to have some kind of control over their life. Divination is another way. What is divination? Divination was defined as the foreseeing and the foretelling of events considered as happening by chance. The assumption was that information about what to do and what would happen was available, that humans only needed the proper method of learning it. And the ways of gaining the desired information was numerous and varied. Throwing dice in front of a temple, observing the direction from which lightning came, examining the entrails of an animal, wow, watching the flight of birds, listening to a chance remark. All of those were seen as a way to discern and to divine the future. Contact with a superhuman being might be sought for the purposes of divination, thinking they could stop the omens and what they indicated. He summarized the philosophical criticism of divination by saying, quote, "It is compounded by a little error, a little superstition, and a great deal of fraud." And that is Cicero in his treatise on divination in chapter 2. So he was a realist. Mistakes in divination, like those in astrology, were explained away, just like mistakes in medicine were. The phenomena was there, but the practice was a human skill, and one did not reject the reality because of mistakes. So the desire to foretell the future is deep-rooted and not easily discouraged. Today we have newspapers that have horoscopes that give advice based on what sign you were born under. Completely bogus, but believed by people today. Next was the healing cults. You can probably anticipate what healing cults were directed at. They were popular. Humanity and its mortality and physical weakness is always going to provide an audience for the healing cults. People will always be attracted to healing, even in our movement. The charismatic healers, for example, Catherine Kuhlman, Oral Roberts. Several healing gods were worshipped in the Hellenistic world. They developed around the mythology of a local healing god. People went to them seeking alleviation for human suffering, to prolong life, and medical knowledge was limited. Asclepius, the most famous and some say Christ-like healing god, because of the myth of refusing to go to the Olympus, but stay on earth to heal, showing mercy and compassion. But his healing was based on one's merit. You had to be worthy of the healing. That became a very subjective judgment of who is worthy of healing. It involved visitation to Asclepius' temple, like for example in Corinth there was a huge one there, ritual and sacrifice offering to them, and then divine visitation, that is through snakes touching you when you sleep on a mantis. So in Gordon Fee's commentary on Corinth, he tells of the archaeology of this site. The patient purified himself at the sacred fountain, offered a sacrifice, honey cakes or something like that, and at night the person would take bed clothes after leaving a small gift for the god, usually a casting of the body part that needed healing. And so reposed then on a pallet, a mantis, in the abation, that room where there were snakes. The person would dream that the gods appeared. And we shouldn't wonder at this in view of the religious excitement of that shrine. I mean, just think about it. The regimen of diet and exercise imposed on them at the temple, and then sleeping in new surroundings. And the god either healed directly or gave instruction to be followed in order to effect the cure. These instructions were told to the priest, who interpreted their meaning and gave the medical prescription, which often agreed with what is known of medical practice in the day. So the Temple of Scriptus, another example is at Kos, the island of Kos, home of the famous medical school of Hippocrates. In particular, seemed to combine religious healing with current medical practice. So custom called for a gift of thanksgiving to the gods for the healing. A feature of sanctuary, such as that of Asclepius, was a pit for keeping the sacred non-poisonous snake, by the way. I wouldn't sleep a wink if I was on a bed near snakes. But anyway, snakes were sacred to many deities, but their prominence in the cult of Asclepius added to the feelings shared by Jews and Christians that there was a demonic element in pagan religion. Now, think about the symbol of healing today. It's this little thing with a snake, right? Oh, wow, it's still there with us. So real physical healings did take place at these sites, but the question, of course, is the source of that power. Next on the list is magic. Not the kind we go to, like in Branson, misdirection and other tricks of the trade in their shows. That's entertainment. But this is an ancient practice, and many forms of magic in the ancient Near East were forbidden by Yahweh for his people to practice. Magic, in fact, involved efforts to control supernatural forces, spiritual entities, for one's own means of employing some secret wisdom to control those forces. Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, said magic incorporated three arts: medicine, religion, and astrology. So the root idea of magic was that by employing proper means, the gods or demons could be forced to do something for you. Vital to the belief was two different planes of forces that you had to deal with, one natural and one spiritual, supernatural. The possibility of transferring a thing from one realm to the next, the number of magical papyri from the 2nd to the 6th centuries AD, but most, by the way, are 3rd and 4th century that have survived. Some are brief recipes for magical processes or exorcisms, or collections such as recipes with more ambitious invocations and methods for securing control over supernatural forces. So we need to keep in mind that for the average Greco-Roman person, we must understand the heavy burdens which they sought to lay down in the shrines of these Oriental cults. And what were these burdens? Well, Samuel Agnes lists some of in his book on Roman mystery religions. He lists, for example, life threatened by the tyranny of fate. Harmamente, the word for fate, in the astrological sense of determinism, referred to the chain of events linked as cause and effect so that they must happen. And then next, the caprice of fortune. The god Fortune, you might receive a curse or a blessing at any time. And then the burden of the malice of ubiquitous demons. Everyone had a demon or a spiritual power in their life. In fact, Plato said his demon is who guided him in his thinking and philosophy. And then there was the crushing weight of astralism. That's the heavenly bodies or gods whose movement control earthly events, even to the small details. And unless you control those star powers, you can't have deliverance. And there was the dread of magic, sorcery. So what about today? Just think about it. In one of the most popular movies ever came out, Star Wars, there's this notion that out there in the universe, there are forces of good and forces of evil. And Luke is told by his mentor, use the Force. Why? To defend, to combat the evil, control their destiny, using and manipulating the Force. Well, that's the same kind of manipulating and control that's sought through Greco-Roman pagan magic. So there's a variety of forms. They did certain actions. Sympathetic magic, where you do some kind of magic ritual involving a similarity or imitation of something. Use of symbolic action. You have an enemy and you take a doll that represents him and you drive a spike through his heart and he'll die by sword. Or you put him in the fire, like Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. So this notion we can actually cause certain things to happen by imitating the method by which we want the person to be harmed or brought to an end. Then there's this contagious magic. So there's sympathetic magic and contagious magic, in which they go through a ritual. You take a cast of a leg, you break it, and then with the right incantation, with the right formula, this is supposed to bring about that action of healing. Modern examples that lend credibility to ancient practices would come from, for example, even today, voodoo and certain satanic rituals. So we as Christians believe that God is capable of healing and delivering from all forms of evil, but we also know that Satan is real and that he is a master deceiver, a counterfeit of God's gift of the Spirit and of his blessings. So we can expect to see this kind of manifestations of magic in the lost and pagan world. The root idea, of course, is that God, the spiritual forces, can be manipulated or forced to work for you. Common practice was verbal incantation, formulas based on revealed esoteric knowledge. This sets in motion forces and effects. Words have innate power to move these forces. That was the underlying presupposition. Words have innate power. So we make fun of it by saying hocus pocus, abracadabra, Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, he opens the door with a magic formula. But the bottom line is that pagans believe that when you speak, you put in motion spiritual forces, and that words have innate power to move those forces. Well, look at some of the literature that passes for charismatic Christianity. Many times their emphasis is on positive confession. It comes very close to being a pagan variety. This notion that words can manipulate, control spiritual forces. It's a pagan idea. Okay, last, I'm going to mention demonology. In the Hellenistic world, the idea of demons goes back as far as possible. The earliest literature we have mentions demons. Various views of their nature and origin. The powers of the gods is what Homer called the demons. Deified men is Hesiod, the 6th century BC. By the way, Homer's 9th century BC. Demons are spiritual beings generated by the copulation of the sons of God and nymphs. That was Plato's view in the 4th century BC. Demons are the divine element in man. Plato later in his thinking said each man has a daimonion that represents his divine element. And then there was also the idea by Xenocrates, Plato's student. He said there was 3 kinds of demons: disembodied beings, permanent on earth, souls of the dead, and then the soul in us. So pagan demonology needs to be placed alongside of the Bible for contrast. The Bible, nowhere affirms this idea that demons are the souls of the dead, or the soul in us. The origin of evil, unclean, or demonic spirit is put at the time of Satan's rebellion against God. These evil spirits that became demons, fallen angels that became demons, are unredeemable and they have no will at this point to go back and change what they did. The angels were given a choice, and that choice cannot be changed. So there's good angels and evil angels today. The evil angels are demons. That's the biblical view. My comments about pagan demonology: demons were in effect a way for pagan people to deal with the problem of evil. Since it was unthinkable, not to mention dangerous, to attribute all evil to the gods, an attempt to explain the existence of evil in the material world by assigning blame to intermediary beings. Ions is the Greek word that indicates this. These ions between men and gods. So it's blame shifting to ions. By the way, that term is used to talk about the gods of this world in Paul's writings. And in an attempt to explain and to some extent control the influence of demons via exorcism, the ancient Near East also records this activity by Egyptian priests practicing exorcism using incantations and secret formulas. The Gospels even record Jesus and his disciples casting out demons, and this was a practice of the Jews as well. Jesus mentions this when defending himself against the charge that he cast out Satan by Beelzebub. Do you remember the story in Acts about Jews trying to cast out demons? Jesus I know, Paul I know, but who are you? And it's that whole story in Acts 19. A number of those that practiced magical arts brought their books together and burned them in the sight of all. They counted the value and found it to be 50,000 pieces of silver. That's how prevalent this kind of activity was, and this belief in magic and demonology. So some conclusions on popular Greco-Roman religions. Observations is this, that popular religions were a suitable alternative to the official established civic cults, which did not meet the personal needs of the individual. It opened to ordinary people, so you don't have to be elite. It was a personal instead of collective. It was not political. It seems to be a popular in mystery religions, and they were open to the masses. And so we're going to look at mystery religions a little bit more closely in the next lecture. But this is the kind of thing that we have going on in the New Testament world because of the religious scene of the Hellenistic world at this time.